Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Outrun Show. Today we're talking about the best tools in the gym to learn flips on and how to find the best mentor on this episode of the Outrun Show. Some synth improv there. Some synth beatboxing. Justin, can you hit me with that?
Wow.
I like that. That's all right. Up and over.
Up and away.
All right. So,
We're getting closer to the sound every time.
yeah. Do you guys remember Police Academy?
No.
Never saw Police Academy. And then who else? And then on Spaceballs too. There was an act. Well, who is it? Michael Winslow. Because he used to do the beatboxing and the sort of tech. He would do imitations, but of machinery and technology. And you'd probably recognize the rhetoric because on Spaceballs they'd be like, okay, start the scan or something like that, and he's and they'd be like looking at him like, okay, but nothing's actually happening. It's just he's making noises.
Making the noises.
Right, exactly. So great. I'm sure there's some sort of super clip of him hitting all those impressions. Back then it was super impressive, but now I feel like other things, just in general, technology and social media and the shareability of people, which kind of leads back to our topic of mentorship that we'll get to in our second here. It just raises the bar so high. Like the things that were impressive even 10 years ago, or especially in the 90s, was
But I worry sometimes that right now, if you see a clip of somebody doing a standing double back, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at it and you're like, wow. It's still as athletes, we're that's pretty impressive. But I've straight up have heard muggles, which is our loving term for those who don't do parkour movement. For those of you listening, will watch that and be like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's mind-blowing. But I wonder if we've actually, and we know this, we've had African tribesmen who as a part of their rite of passage or whatever,
right.
They're dancing all night, and they're running, and they're doing these crazy things, right? Have probably been doing standing double backs for several hundred years now, if not longer, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if now, just with technology and the shareability of it, it's just now that we see it. For a lot of those things that
captured.
we're oh my gosh, look what people can do now, is no, people have been doing that for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
We just only now know about it.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's speculation too, but that's hard because you could I think that happens a lot in Chinese martial arts, or just martial arts in general, where people will start telling fish tales about their abilities, and then there's just no understanding of so it's interesting because it's the discoverability of what is possible. I think it's still exciting to see it captured, and we should celebrate it now because we could make the assumption, but you don't know until you've actually seen it recorded. But yeah, there's certainly people out there, our ancestors are not getting credit for the double backs of the past.
No, in fact, unfortunately, I think a lot of people recognized, because I remember when the clips came out of the first couple of people in our modern era that were hitting standing double backs.
Yeah.
And people were the YouTube clip was clickbaity, of course, because they want the views, but it was first ever standing double back.
Yeah.
And the comment section was just nah, people in Africa have been doing standing double backs for quite a while now. It's
right.
Just a dance, right?
Yeah.
It's just a cool trick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of people are recognizing there's a lot of cool stuff out there that we've done before, we just now only capture. So
right.
I don't think you get to claim first ever in the world unless it's first ever iPhone 12 off the market.
I felt that way about Aliens. We were talking about Aliens before the show started, but it was what really made me not believe in aliens is that instantly, the X-Files came out in the 90s, and then you'd get these TV shows where it'd be Area 51, all this hype, and you just be oh man, this stuff is right on the cusp. If only we had some magical way to capture anything that happened at any moment, and then we'd know. And then we got it, and no aliens showed up. or they showed up and there's just so much content you can't tell what's
I
real.
don't know. I mean, the Air Force did release
Right.
those clips.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird that they would have done that.
I just think it's so they acknowledge UFOs, and you can link this one out. This is not like conspiracy. This is not your uncle's Facebook page, right? Because he's in the know, right? It's like they just decided to say, look, we have UFOs and other
legitimate
technology
UFO,
of our
which is
world.
just an unidentified flying object,
Right.
So, not the like we've identified aliens. They're just like, we don't know what it was that was flying.
Yeah, and I think that right now what people are openly saying is that the technology is not of this world, is what they say. But I still just think it's space birds or transformers.
Wasn't it like metals though that they found? Like
Yeah,
it was
material.
like materials,
It's
right?
material.
They're like, we don't know how this is made.
Yeah, but that's what
No one made it here.
that's just transformers, right?
Okay. Oh, I see.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
becomes like more and more, now we're getting off topic, but becomes more and more realistic as we see the development of like AI and, like robots from, Boston Dynamics.
Boston Dynamics, yeah.
Right? The combination of that
And
plus like
Neuralink.
AI plus Neuralink from Tesla is like, there's a perfect storm coming on the horizon.
It seemed super unreasonable even 5 years ago, and now you're just like, yeah.
Have you guys watched The Expanse yet? On
The
Amazon?
Expanse?
Oh,
No.
okay. We can't keep talking about aliens. You guys watch The Expanse.
All right, I'll check it out. But
I
I
feel
have
like
been
it
watching
started
Transformers since I was
didn't
like 5,
connect with
so I'm just saying,
It's just-
pretty sure that it was like a Decepticon.
Dude, yeah, hopefully they're all Autobots.
Mm-hmm.
That's fingers crossed. Anyways, so let's talk about
Flips.
speaking of technology and tools and like all the things that we have that can both destroy us or make us better. We wanted to talk. We had a little bit of discussion about like what tool kind of in the gym do we think is really your best? Like if you had to pick one tool in the gym to learn your flipsies, which one is your go-to?
And which one would you throw out?
We can add that one as a bonus.
So, man, I actually.
Well, break down the categories for us.
Yeah.
First,
Oh,
like of all facilities, just general.
Well, let's start with the ones that we have. We have the foam pit. So that's just a giant, box above or below ground with a bunch of foam, and an air trick, which is I think that thing's like 13 inches tall, inflatable air mattress.
Yeah, it's
bouncy.
a giant. It's for a sleepover for like 100 people.
Yep.
It's
It's
huge.
literally just an air mattress, and then there's spring floor. So
Spring
and
floor
then I
is-
would also include like blocks, like gymnastic blocks. I think that's like a category.
You mean
Well,
like spotting blocks? I think
Yeah.
we can lump in movable like spotting blocks as
Yeah.
one category.
Because
As, like,
you can have
one-
those without any of the other pieces of equipment.
Well,
also
and
have-
because you can buy a lot of spotting blocks for the cost of any of those other three.
Mm. And you also have trampolines.
Yep.
Both the
Yeah,
Euro
tramps.
tramps, which are the tightly woven ones. They look like mesh, but they pop you really high. Then you have the mini tramps, which are just the smaller,
I would lump those in with the spotting block, like
Yeah,
movable
yeah.
tramps.
movable little like
But trampoline is
Punchy,
definitely its own category. So
tribby things. And then you have like stunt bags.
yes, which I would lump in with the foam pit.
Yeah.
Really?
With any sort of pit.
Yeah,
Pit.
because they're like a pit thing. So, but I
Pit thing.
honestly, if I had to only have one, it would be an in-ground pit. I think.
Wait. Oh, wow. So you're saying you only have one, you go with in-ground pit.
Yes.
Okay, well, before you say why, let's go around.
Okay, yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
we're going
because
to
we
I thought
always
we
we
were gonna be
always
on the
do
same
that,
page.
and then
Yep.
I feel like we just someone talks for like 30 minutes on one thing. Okay, Jesse.
That's tough because I'm not like a huge acrobat kind of guy.
Okay, take
But I
a
would
second
go-
to think. Or because I have mine if you want to think about it for another second.
I would
No.
go with spring floor.
Spring floor.
I'd go spring floor.
Oh, man, now you're making me second guess.
Well, here's
is
the
why
thing.
we have
Here-
three
and this
different
may
things.
change, Travis.
Okay.
Not to, I don't want to call you out here, but this may change in 10 years when I'm your age.
This is true.
Because you go.
Yeah, you're right.
I'll
I'm
explain
going to
why.
say, for the purpose of learning acrobatics and flips, I would say that the air track is the one I would go to.
Yep.
There's like no. I think we have to reasonably though, like measure because if it's an AT, you could
Air track.
theoretically have an AT. Yeah, air track or air mattress.
Right.
sleepover, pump mattress, whatever
Right.
you want to call
Yeah.
them, right? We don't want to call brands out.
Heavy
Air Trick
duty
is a
air
brand.
Oh,
for
it's a
Reckon.
yeah.
They don't
They're like
pay us
Kleenex. They did a good
Anything
job
to
with
say
it.
the name, so we're just gonna call
No,
it.
we paid them more than.
But anyways, that's been nice. But anyways, I would say that you kind of have to cap it within the budget because you could be like, well, an Air Trick the size of a spring floor is technically a spring floor, but that would cost you $60 grand.
It depends on what you put on top of the springs, though, because I know those gymnastics, like the flooring that they put on top of the spring floor, is probably more expensive than the actual mechanics underneath.
Than the springs? No, I think your cost is primarily lumped in with your springs and
They get pretty
floor
close,
connections.
actually. I think you're right. Yeah, they get pretty
You think
close.
so?
Those
Well,
were pretty
I
close.
mean, that's pretty reasonable. I guess we're not talking. Okay, so the exception of like some sort of anti-gravity fan system that exists only in like Dubai or something.
Yeah.
I won't go that far. It's pretty reasonable to have a big old Air Trick.
Okay.
I don't know. I think. Well, what was the budget? Let's see. The spring floors usually run you for a full size spring floor. It's gonna run
full
you
size, like a
12
41
grand,
by
right?
41.
Yeah.
Oh, more
Yeah.
than that.
It's
Yeah.
gonna run you 12.
15 to 25. No way. In those Gibson catalogs or whatever they're
Well, those are pre-made setups for nubs that don't know how to set up a spring floor on their
If
own.
we're getting scrappy.
They're pretty equal to an Air Trick of our size.
I would say square footage wise, or per square foot, they're probably almost the exact same price.
Yeah.
Foam pit actually.
Okay, so
assuming
we'll
you're
just say
not
within
doing-
reason because
Yeah, that's
most
what I
people
mean.
probably don't care about that. Maybe they do.
They're taking.
Yeah, we're taking notes over here.
Stop that.
Well, let me tell you right now, if you try and build the stuff we're talking about, you're talking about a lot of money. So save your pennies for your
Yes.
basement, Junior.
Um,
Alright.
But anyways, and then foam pit, assuming you're not going in ground, might actually be your cheapest option out of the three of them, or the 4 or 5.
Yeah,
You know?
I think
Well,
ours was.
trampoline is pretty expensive too.
I think this. Anyway, okay. All right, so they're all within reason because we
Yeah.
have somehow acquired them. So
Over time.
over time.
Yes. 1 by 1.
Yeah. So for use though, what do you?
So I do
Say
pit
you answer
because
first.
Yeah, you do get the claim the first on that.
because I feel like it's pretty easy to learn majority of flips where you land back on your feet with low impact if you're doing it right and you're using progressive skills. So things like a backflip never really should be thrown like a huck. Like you can always have something in between, like a back handspring. And if you're trying to learn a back handspring, you can learn this cartwheel that goes backward, macaco. So I feel like for most flips, I can actually just learn them on something that's semi-soft like grass if I take my time. But there are some moves where I know I'm gonna eat it, and neither the air trick or the spring floor helps me out with that. The pit is the one where I can literally throw something and fail on purpose, like land on my side and be safe with it, and I can experiment with that. But you can't do that with anything else besides a super squishy mat, and then you're going to need other things so that you can jump off of it onto those mats. So I think the pit allows me to do the things that are the hardest for me to learn. The moves that scared me the most, the moves that I understand the least, the pit helps me the most.
Okay.
But the air trick is something you can go on for like a week and train on it, and sometimes you won't even know it, right? So I understand that one's pretty good for like actually finishing out moves, and so that's why I feel like it was my initial pick, because we learned so many flips when we got it. Like the second we got it, like the first year, everybody had new flips. So I think pit is the one that helps me the most when I'm scared the most. I'm a scared little boy shivering
over the flips.
like burning.
Yeah.
It's also 30 degrees right now, so that could be a reason why you're shivering.
So yeah, I'm excited. Can we tell people what our new pit
No.
is?
Hold on.
Okay.
I don't know. I just felt like saying no to that because I wanted to.
Yeah,
build
we'll
up.
wait.
You
We'll
get
wait.
excited and then you want to spill
I do.
beans.
I really do.
You gotta build up to this stuff.
A couple of these parents know that. They're like, "Can you just tell me?" No. Are you sure? Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yes, if you want the inside scoop, just DM Justin and he'll probably spill the beans. So it's not a big deal. Sorry, you guys, it's part of the drama. We can't tell you what happens in season 2 halfway through season 1. We wouldn't be any fun that way.
It's true.
Spoiler alert. You're going. Okay. You're going?
Yeah, I can.
You
So
answered Max, right?
spring floor. Well, I was gonna go this way because it kind of seems like
Okay, that's fine.
that's a logical from
Progression.
super squishy to semi squishy.
So, that does make sense. All right, I like your logic. So the spring floor, or not, sorry, the air track, because I feel like it is the closest thing to like, anti-gravity. I mean, it still is a surface. It will bite. Like if it's inflated all the way, it's sometimes can hurt worse than spring floor if you fall on it. Yeah, it slaps you around a little bit. But the ability to sort of, but it is still less impact, and it gives you a little more punch than, it's like just a step above the spring floor when it comes to bouncy and squishy, but it still kind of feels like you're on a surface. And and for me, I just unlocked or got consistent the vast majority of my flips probably on the air track. And I've been somebody who'd been working on like a B twist since my late teens at least, right? And none of that stuff, I didn't iron out that stuff until my 30s, and I think that's because the consistency of being able to train on that and the sustainability of it.
Yeah.
Like I've, knock on wood or whatever that is supposed to be, I don't think I've ever been injured on the air track, and for the amount of volume I've spent on it, that's a lot of volume. Like I would say it's probably the training tool I've used the most outside of a spring floor. And also the other thing I like about it is maybe with an in-ground foam pit, when I've trained on those, you can kind of get the like run up to it, right? So you do have that sort of relationship. But once let's say you do land the trick in the pit, even if you land it perfectly, it's kind of really far from reality. It's more of like okay, now you kind of understand the movement enough to be able to land it, but you didn't really like do it on anything that resembles like flat earth, right? Mm-hmm. So you're with the air track, like you could pretty much just do all your tricks on it. And yeah, somebody would come along and they'd say, yeah, but you're just doing that on the air track, it's not real, right? And I'm like, cool, go throw tricks on gravel, because that's how I value things, right? It's like the experience of seeing it is still there, right? Yeah. And yeah, you can kind of be like, well, he's on an air trick. Okay, but you still saw it. It was cool, right? Yeah, it was a cool combo. And then doing it feels so much better and safer. Like nothing feels as like intense as like landing like gnarly tricks on concrete or even grass, right? But there's a lot of risk there. That gets taken out. And then I would say the ability for multiple people to work on it is there on an air track. So you can still get that sort of like step onto the platform, right? And that community aspect's a little more present. I haven't noticed that with pits. I've definitely noticed that with spring floor. I think that's definitely there. Yeah, and I think that the reason I didn't say spring floor, and you could answer to this, is just that spring floors are pretty close to grass if the grass is softer, right? As far as like if you crash, you're gonna bounce a little bit, but you still like you're at that like maybe an air track is like you're 20% away from reality, but the spring floor brings you closer to like 10 from like true reality on the ground or something like that. Because you can still punch on the AT and it'll send you, but the other ironic thing is that although you're safer on the air track, I think that some moves, like even like a B twist that doesn't rely on punches to get you up to set, is actually easier to execute on a spring floor or flat ground.
Yeah, you want a quick response.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they're just scarier. And that's it. Get over that. So I think that's my reason. I think that I believe personally after training, as long as I have with training flips and stuff, just in the maturity, I think I could probably continue to train on an air track until well into my 60s probably.
Yeah, probably longer.
Yeah, depending on the technology. I'm telling you, I'm waiting for my.
It's probably not as
I'm
exciting,
waiting for my stem cell EpiPens. Then yeah, get done with the session. Ooh, the bursa's no good no more. New bursa. Ah.
I think I would go with spring floor because it is the closest to reality and thus translates the best external, which is kind of, I guess it depends on what your goal is, right? Like if your goal is I just want to move and have fun, then a foam pit's probably great, right?
Yeah.
Or some sort of pit is fine because your goal is just to have fun and enjoy the movement aspect of it. if your goal is to like mitigate risk but still be able to move, then I think an air trick's great. Obviously, the goal is to not just learn a trick, but to own it and master it. And I think the spring floor is your best result for that. I also, what you don't get from a pit or an air trick is you don't get any sort of impact. And that's obviously the goal, is you don't want the impact. But as a result of that, you're not getting any like
Bone
density stimulus. Yeah. So when you try and translate from like, oh, I spend 15 hours a week on an air trick and I have these things really dialed down, and then I go to grass, your bones are not ready for that because they just haven't taken the impact that they need to. And a spring floor obviously reduces the impact significantly, because I will throw some stupid stuff on the air trick and I land, or on the spring floor, and I like bounce and I do the like flop thing and I'm like, and then I get up and I try it again, right? Which I wouldn't do outside of grass. So it does reduce the impact, but there's still enough impact that I'm still getting the same stimulus that I need if I wanted to translate it outside. It's not so jarring and abrupt for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that matters. I think your progression or your speed of progression is going to be significantly slower if you don't have access to a pit or an air trick. But I think your end result of being able to master the skills that you worked on is going to be there, and you're going to lock it down a lot faster.
I think I would agree. And I also think that my pick is still the same, just primarily because of my age. But and age isn't everything, but it's something. But the spring floor is definitely I do enjoy actualizing more on the spring floor.
Yeah. Well, and it feels good to hit something on the spring floor because you get a
little feedback, yeah.
I'm super close to actually having this, right? When I hit things like I can throw a double full on the AT, and 1 out of 3 times I land it and it's like pretty clean, but the 2 out of 3 times would break me outside. So, and I do that, and I haven't thrown it on the spring floor because I know that like the impacts of hitting it 2 out of 3 times, of failing 2 out of 3 times is just not. That's just not. I don't want to risk that injury. You know what I mean? So the air trick helps me overreach, if you will, to use like training terminology. It helps me overreach, right, on my skills. But I don't know. At some point, I have to be like, it's not real yet, Mm-hmm. But it's like you're saying, you do it on an air trick, it doesn't count. Right? It's a little bit of that, but not the same ego.
You just have there are less. Again, if we draw back to my hatred for the Bosu ball. Bosu,
I had a dream about Bosu balls.
Really?
It's all your fault, man.
Were you surrounded by them and couldn't escape?
It's
you were
definitely
running down a hallway and they were on the walls and you were just like ricocheting.
I'm getting chased by a giant one with arms and legs. I'm
gonna stabilize your knees.
I'm going to stabilize your weak points in the kinetic chain. The AT could be a giant flat Bosu ball, I suppose. So there, that'll balance out my affection for rubber.
Travis likes Bosu balls when they're flat.
It's true, because they're no longer a Bosu ball; they're an air track, or a air mattress, or whatever the general term is. So I agree with you on that. I think if you're somebody, especially if you're somebody who's trying to learn like on your own, I think that an air track has value. But let's switch it up real quick. What is the tool that you think is the most overrated and you hate about using for training or using for training people?
Trampolines, yeah. I think that's probably the shared one. Trampoline is just like you just jump on a trampoline and then you get on the ground and your body has already forgotten what gravity is. Like you bounce for 10 minutes, you step on the ground, your body's like, what is this? Get me back on the tramp. And so anything that you learn on the tramp, I mean, the air awareness is the only thing that you really keep, but the takeoff and the landing are completely worthless.
The mechanics are even completely different.
It's fun, and I love being on trampolines, and I love doing flips on trampolines, but I would never use them to train a flip that I wanted to do on any other real surface.
Yeah. But what about, I think that with trampolines, they're just hyper specialized, right? So if you, if the foam pit allows you to throw something and then kind of see where you get but landing, as long as you treat them that way. I mean, some people just do trampoline because trampoline is what
Yep.
they like to do. They're fun for them and whatnot. But as far as injury rates go, I mean, we know this because of insurance companies and what they'll take. And when you say we don't have a trampoline, they're like, "Oh, we love you guys," right? And if they say trampoline, you're like, "Oh, well, they know what the injury rates are on them."
Mhm.
But because I think it's back to your earlier point, like humans and speed. Like when you take humans and you throw them down like a ski slope and this is again the person shopping at Walmart now is going 60 miles an hour down the ski slope and just can run into anything.
Yep.
You have that problem, and then you have with trampolines, you have someone being thrown up, and it's like, where are they going? And, right, and why? So I would say, I think that the real reason I would push not to have a trampoline in gyms, except for the mini tramps being the exception, where you can get like kind of learn to punch and rotate. I think that's sufficient, a single one, and that's where I've learned my from cartfuls, my front halves and stuff like that. And to be honest, taught a lot of backflips on them. The little mini trampoline, mini Euro tramps work great for just getting around. But someone who's very comfortable with like twisting, I think the trampoline could be helpful with that, because you get a lot of time to learn that feeling of twisting. That being said, I've never learned a trick on a trampoline.
Yeah,
I think you could refine twisting ability, because I see some people who are like, okay, I'm working on,
There's not a tramp big enough out there for me to want to start working my twisting skills.
That's the problem.
Like people are like, oh yeah, but you can learn twisting on a trampoline because you get so much height. And I'm like, yeah, on an 8x10 trampoline where there are literally metal springs hanging out. No way, thank you. Mm-mm. No way, because I'm gonna twist and I'm gonna go off to the side. And I'm just gonna smash my toe onto something hard, like the frame.
And again, the super tramps, those ones that are like 20x20, like the size of our
those ones. If it was that one, I would totally work on it.
But I've never been on one of those.
But the problem is,
no.
Okay.
The problem with them though is that that's
a lot of real estate for very little use too.
And they lie to you. Lie. The truth is you can't get that high without the earth being like, "Come back to me, lover." And the earth doesn't welcome you softly. Okay?
No.
When you're a prodigal son to the earth and you try and leave, the earth does not be like, "Oh, come and eat," and it's just like,
"Wow,
why'd you leave?"
Yeah, there is this very controlling relationship.
It's true.
You cannot get far without it pulling you back in.
So I don't like it because whatever trick you have, you're not used to landing it. You'll never get the mechanics of landing and impact, and it will never translate to something firmer as a result of that.
Yeah.
You can get the skill, but then you'll have to spend so much time trying to actually learn the mechanics of takeoff and landing, which are just as important as the flip itself. So you're really only getting one out of the three pieces of a flip, right? Takeoff, flip, landing. You're only getting the middle one.
And then you're also not getting where I think the gold is. Like, it's one thing, and this is the difference between us and where we aspire to be even, and a trampoline park or somebody who just has a bunch of equipment, is you don't get the progressions. You know what I mean? Like, if you know the progressions, it's like it's getting dropped off in the forest, and you're like, oh, I found this wonderful land that is this flip that I want, but you don't know how to get back there. So if you leave it for injury or for atrophy or whatever, how do you get back? If you know the progressions, you can always get back, or you can just take a step back, right?
Yep.
So if you're like, oh well, I can't do back handsprings anymore, well, I'm just gonna do macacos, or I'm gonna do backwards cartwheels, or I'm gonna do a cartwheel. As you get older, or as your style changes, you might decide, okay, I'm just not gonna go that hard, and now I know where to be. But if you're like, oh well, my trick used to be a double full, and I don't know anything between backflip and that anymore, it's like you're kind of boxed in. It's just not as interesting potentially. So I'm not saying that that we should never have trampolines, but I would agree. But I'm actually gonna say I don't like the foam pit.
Oh yeah, the foam part of the pit is definitely the worst.
It's gross.
Yeah, you're a bit of a germaphobe, which is not the discussion.
Okay, I mean, I would say that it's very easy, but we're talking about what we don't like. Which technique we're not.
Well, yeah, what tool is the best, right? And if we're talking about trampolines as a tool to learn techniques and flips, it's definitely on the lowest tier of this equipment helps you learn stuff.
Ranks pretty low.
Yeah. So,
and I just think that's because of progressions too. Like, I think so many people will hear us say that and just be like, these guys have no idea. these guys even flip, bro. Like, I know that people are gonna be saying that or saying that.
We'll just drop that Orbit video right after this.
Yeah, we did have a shenanigan video. Exactly. I don't think many of us, our coaches have been on trampolines before, but no one relies seriously on them. They do trampoline sessions for fun and maybe some experimentation. But
follow
they
up
didn't
that,
get
like,
there.
Every
on that.
like if you're a tramp, we call them tramp kids, which is not insulting. It's actually just a label.
Trampoline kids.
Yeah,
Tramp
trampoline
kids.
kids. Like if that's you, cool. Like nobody's in like your Olympic or your trapeze. What do they call that? Like where you're like in a circus and
Trapeze.
you trapeze.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to butcher that, but in any case, like if that's you, awesome.
Right.
They do incredible stuff. We're not trying to take that away. What we're trying to say is like
It's
if
his
you're
own
doing
domain.
parkour and you're trying to supplement flips into your practice, a trampoline won't carry over the best.
It's not for parkour.
Tool
like,
for
there's-
parkours. That's
Tool
what
for
we
parkour is our value there. What we're judging it against. And then I would also say that just understand that if you're doing tramp stuff, it's like that's its own domain. Like it really is its own domain, and it's just like stepping on the holodeck in Star Trek. You're just like, okay, just understand you're in the holodeck now, and that's this one room that is very isolated from reality and requires very specific conditions to do what you're going to do. And then you step out. There's not a lot of great translation. Okay, well I think we figured that out. We can tell them that we're gonna destroy.
Oh, our pit is leaving.
Yeah.
The middle of this month. So
I mean, primarily this is because of COVID. We just can't use it, and we know we're going to a new location, so we want that space to be used for things that we can train in the meantime. And
It's just
I mean, foam pits were even before because we got non-flame retardant foam. So I just read an article. I was looking on researching foam pits, and that gymnastics have like a certain amount of the flame retardant chemical in their bloodstream.
Really?
Yep, because all of the foam is treated with flame retardant stuff. Firefighters have this too, and so it's in their bloodstream for gymnastics. And so I knew that going in 5 years ago when I ordered that. So I got non-flame retardant thing. So our thing is just a giant tinderbox.
For those concerned about like fire hazard, we have 3 sprinklers above the foam pit and 3 fire extinguishers on. So we didn't just be like
little
fireballs
usable that we wanted to use, but we
will.
The urge.
So we didn't. There's a reason the like flame retardant ones matter. We did choose it because we felt it was healthier for our athletes and also supplemented with enough fire prevention, like sprinkler system, which is not normally above a foam pit, and tons of fire extinguishers. So anybody that was like, "Oh my God, they have a pile of Kindle there."
Yeah.
We did take precautions. We didn't just make that decision willy nilly.
Yeah, we meet code on fire protection and we exceed it because we went after even the guy who came over the fire march was like, oh, I like that you guys got these fire extinguishers right here and there. So he was very impressed. And then we also researched, I'm looking at them right now, those fireballs I found from like some company out of Thailand. And they're these like, how big is that? Like about the size of like a dodgeball?
It's like a 5. Yeah, that is a dodgeball size.
It's basically dodgeball size. And they're these orange plastic balls, but if you throw them and the temperature reaches a certain degree around them, they explode and basically what's inside of a fire extinguisher explodes over the area. So in the demo videos, and we definitely need to blow one up before we move. Not in here. I'm just saying like we probably should blow one of those things up just for fun. And record that and share it. I think that would be
they're
really
super effective too. And what we liked about them was that kids could, not that a kid needs to put out a fire, but if a kid did need to put out a fire, they can grab it and Whereas like a fire extinguisher is like you gotta pull the pin and then pull the nozzle out, aim it.
Yeah, and you just throw it at stuff. Like I don't want to get next to a fire and like hit it with a fire. I just like throw the fireball at it. And you're like, they basically are really big, like the like ninja. Ninja like smoke balls. There's like fire, you throw it up, poof, and then you just like disappear. Anyway,
they're pretty cool.
Yeah, that's that.
So foam pits have always been bad for your health.
Yeah, not a fan. Yep.
So he's gone.
He's gone.
Say goodbye.
He's gone. Okay, so on to mentorship, or do you guys have anything more you want to say about the flippy tools?
Nope.
Okay, good. So, we're transitioning into the subject of mentors, and we think this is important because earlier on in our own life experiences and in culture, the question of like how to pick a mentor, like what do you need mentors, who's the best mentor, that kind of thing is really a very serious question, and it's something that has benefited our culture early on, and we noticed that when the gym size was under 50 members, right? It's very easy for everyone who was in leadership or us as coaches or as mentors to have a connection with almost every student. But as we scale up and roles shift, that becomes harder. And then if you're just someone out there looking for like people to look up to, what are some of the key things that you guys look at, and what's your history with mentors? Why even mentors? Can we just have teachers and bosses and then be good? Or no? Do we need more?
No, because I think a mentor kind of fills the line between, like, you have a boss, right? Which is, everybody has a boss. We all know that. And we all know the lines that you can't really cross with a boss, or that you shouldn't cross with a boss. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's like, they're your boss, so you can't, even if you wanted to, right? Even if you're great friends with your boss. And then you have like teachers, which have a very specific goal that they're going for it. But a mentor is there. A boss is like, hey, I need you to do your job. And here's your job. Here are the roles that you need to fill. A teacher is like, hey, here are the skills that I'm teaching you, mm-hmm. right? And that's what we're going to do. A mentor is like, what do you want to do? What skills do you have that I can help you nurture, right? And it's obvious there's very rarely that specific conversation that goes on. But that's what happens is you're like, hey, I want to get better at making coffee, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a friend who's a barista at a bougie Fort Collins, coffee shop. And as a result of being friends, they're like, oh, well, come in and I'll like show you how to make some coffee. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a thing that I really like. And then that becomes a mentorship role around that specific skill that I wanted to nurture, right? So I think mentors don't typically stick with you for the entirety of your life unless you fall into an industry or a niche that you really like. For example, parkour. Mm-hmm. We've all had parkour mentors that have been with us and are still with us now. But I can think of mentors that I've had for, 1 or 2 years in a specific athletic field or a specific skill set, right? And then after that, we maybe talk every now and then, but for the most part, there's not like the daily interaction that there mm-hmm. used to be. So I think first, that's the big difference mm-hmm. between mentor, teacher, and boss, if you had to kind of separate them. Yeah. And I think that matters.
Yeah, I think definitely never had a mentor that lasted the whole life, unless it's like, parents or something. But definitely had mentors for small windows in my life where I learned super valuable lessons that I think I would, I don't know where I would have picked them up otherwise, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think in high school, my Bible teacher ended up being a mentor for me. Wasn't perfect, but I think he taught the value of being a group and growing together as a group and controlling that culture and making sure that it's about the experience together as you travel wherever you guys go and making sure that you guys stay close together. That was something that I learned from him pretty early on. Though I remember him telling to the principal, we played soccer all day during our class. He got mad at that. And
the principal
got mad at that because he was in the mud. And I think his only response to the principal was, those who play together stay together. Mm. And that really clicked with our whole class, and I think our class just grew with mentors like that watching over us and just confirming that the experiences that we were having as a class were good for us.
And I think that if you watch that little edit that you made for the latest clip, that would also I see that in your approach.
I think it's just super important, right, to make sure that you guys are playing together. Play is why we all did parkour, so it was interesting. I already knew that, right? Our dad was always playing with us. So to hear that from a teacher who he didn't teach PE, right? But he learned that lesson. So I thought it was just weird to learn that from an outside source, not from parkour. Parkour definitely taught me that, but to reinforce it from somewhere else was cool.
Yeah. Mentorship for me isn't you just can't. They were the most important people in my life. Yeah. I think that a mentor is where sometimes it may not be who you want, but it's who you need sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes also there are people who are where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big difference. The mentor mentee relationship is similar to like the student master relationship, right? There's a chemistry there that is unique and important, and something that is sort of more, maybe not general, but it's just like of a domain that really matters either to you or to survival or something like that. My early mentors.
Do you have a Mr. Miyagi level mentor?
Yeah.
Dang. Okay.
Straight
That's
up.
something I
Couple.
definitely don't have. And I feel like
Couple.
that's what everyone thinks about when they say mentor,
Yeah,
is Mr. Miyagi.
but they come in a wide variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a huge number of mentors, crazy number of mentors, and it's absolutely why I actually think that seeking out mentors is a skill set.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that helped me. I would not have broken out of, moved from Iowa and moved to China and then moved here. I mean, just to a degree, my ability to seek out mentors was in part why I partnered with you guys, early on in the business, was because I didn't need someone to be older than me and be the Mr. Miyagi type. Although Cullen's really working on the beard and the bald head, so he at least can he can fit that mold in that way. But yeah, I would say that my first mentors that
Viking Mr. Miyagi.
Yes, exactly. So my first mentors were just very domain specific. That's another thing too, is like you pick a domain that you want to know more about, and then you find someone who's where you want to be in that domain that you look up to, and then that's sort of the pull that I think a lot of our coaches have with students, right? Is they're in a place that they believe is attainable for them, or they admire, and they want to pursue that. Maybe it's nebulous and they can't explain what exactly that person's doing, but they're just cool and they want to do it. So there's that level of mentor.
Yeah.
And earlier on, I had mentors in graphic design, because my dad was a video producer and director, and he introduced me to some guys who were doing work on like video editing and graphic design and stuff like that. And now those guys do work for like Marvel and do like the animation for like the Iron Man movies and stuff like that, and GOT too as well.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're in LA. And I just was like, oh, well, I want to do that. So I chased it. And then early on in high school, I got the opportunity to get involved with groups that were doing graphic design, when most kids were like, I don't even know what that's going to mean. But I was on like a Mac playing in Photoshop, in 8th grade, when, that would have been 96, 97. So not many people were messing around with that stuff. Like I had like Photoshop 1 on my Macintosh 2 and was drawing like little snowboarders and stuff. Like, so that was always something that... A mentor, having seen the mentors there and being in the studios. I remember being in the studio and like the guy there who I was with, his name was Mitch Munson, and he runs like Motion is the name of his company now, and they do all that work in LA. And he had on his wall like he'd done like a Prince album cover, and I was just like, holy cow! And he was super cool. He's just like, yeah, man. He's like, and action figures are cool. And I was like, what? You like action figures? And then he sent me a package in the mail that just had like an X-Men like Gambit character and just like a letter that just said, hey man, thanks for coming up and seeing, just like connecting in that way, and just showed me, oh man, you can grow up and be cool. I think that really mattered to me, and that carries through for what we do now, because we're serious about play, but we're not so business. Am I right?
It's true. I think what you're saying is like, or at least part of what you're saying, what I'm picking up is that mentors can sometimes show you what's possible. Right? Especially if they're older than you. If they're younger than you, then they can recapture something that you thought maybe you weren't able to do. But certainly, right? Like you were like, when I grow up, I have to lose, my hobbies that seem childish. And this guy who's clearly killing it and loving his life is like, what? I think that's awesome. I still do that. Check it out, right?
Yeah.
And it's a bit like us in that like we all play video games.
The optimism.
Still well into our adult years, right? In fact, before I came here, that's literally what I was doing, was playing games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's my hobby, and I love that, and that's like my thing. But I wouldn't know that if we didn't have a dad who was in his 30s when we were growing up, who was playing video games, right? At the same time that he's starting his own business, literally in our basement, right? And he's working on computers, and we're like, oh, well, if it's cool for dad to play video games and do entrepreneurial stuff, then it's cool for me to be an adult when I grow up and play video games too,
Yeah, and he probably just showed you, he was excited about that. I think it's super important that mentors, and one of the differences, you may have a teacher or a boss leading you, or a parent even leading you through subject matter in life, but when they're really passionate about something and you're still doing it, even if it's in a lesser capacity. I think we joked about the guy that we saw on the Netflix series who created Space Invaders but couldn't make it past the first level.
Oh, yes.
He's like, oh, I love my game, but I can't make it past the first level. Like, I think there's some truth to that sometimes, but there's also people who just kill the game later on. One of my, like, so the next big mentor that I had was, or impactful mentor, and a lot of it's just timing with where I was, and there are many others in there, but his name was Eddie Sang, and he was a English teacher from Hong Kong, who was my first martial arts instructor, my first serious martial arts instructor. He taught me Chinese at a very fundamental level, and then introduced me to Wushu Kung Fu and Chinese like philosophy and calligraphy early on, like when I was 14. And I studied with him for another 4 years through my high school, and he actually ended up teaching me English too. But I took his AP English class. But anyway, he really introduced me to sort of what the world could be like outside of the Midwest, right? Outside of Iowa, and that's how I developed a passion for these. And that was just really important to me. Still was practicing Kung Fu, still was teaching, still was just loved the culture, and it was very interesting and so much to learn and do. So that was super cool. And then I would say the next biggest mentor on the movement side was Daniel Pacina, who has been my instructor for, oh man, it's like almost 20 years now, like 17 years or something like that. And the relationship has been on and off, but it's continuous. And then and that was because this is someone who's still doing like amazing stuff, right? So most known for being Johnny Cage in the Mortal Kombat video games, but also worked on Ninja Turtles projects. And so that, for me, when I was a kid, like Ninja Turtles was my Pokemon. Like, you guys are into the Pokemon stuff. Like, that was your thing, right? What would you say your most influential, like...
You guys are into that Pokemon thing, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
exactly how my dad would say it.
Yeah. Pokemon. You guys like that Pokemon stuff, don't you?
No, but I've moved into it. I've played the game, because my daughter likes it.
I think Dragon Ball Z probably had the biggest. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I would say Dragon Ball's up there with me, too.
Pokemon is just
fun,
just little monsters.
Yeah,
but there's not really much to learn from Pokemon.
Well, yeah, I think you guys, I would say you guys have and I've noticed this about you. You have a special affection or interest for like woodland creatures. Like you guys are like, oh, look at that little thing, it's cute. It's kind of like roly poly. Like that's a different relationship with like creatures, small creatures, and wildlife that I can only attribute to Pokemon, because you guys aren't like big like animal lovers, right? You like them, but you guys love little creatures. You're like, oh, look at that guy, he's so... I'm like, and I always remember just the attitude towards the squirrels is just like, oh, look at that like fuzzy-tailed rat, right? Like it wasn't like... I think you guys have an affection for critters that Pokemon helped you.
That's
sure, yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, I can see that going for kids everywhere too.
Yeah, I mean it's also
but
we have
animal
cats.
abuse. Pokemon is not very friendly. It's you trap them in balls and keep them in your hip,
and then throw them at people,
and then
stuff.
the only time you release them is to beat them up.
All right, I'll take your field mouse with my shrew. Battle to the death.
Until one blacks out. Like every time they come out, they black out at the end of the battle. Yeah.
That's
a little ridiculous.
That's horrible. And then I would say also my mentors for just like life mentors, different than movement mentors, would have been like my high school teachers. Very awesome teachers at Metro High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And like these were people who were in touch with real life. I feel like sometimes people say that like academia is out of touch, right? You get, especially when you get to, the post-secondary stuff and coastal elite colleges, or universities, people are saying that these, and I've definitely experienced that too, where there's some out of touch university professors, but these guys were not. They understood life and they understood what life was like for kids, and they were just trying to make that connection. And just this vested interest in you, this sort of like unconditional love. It was like I remember my teacher saying, you guys, because I think in one class time we were kind of judging some of the other students, and they were saying like, we were like, this guy's had enough chances, man, he keeps screwing up. And then like I remember a teacher saying, look, Here, they get a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance, and a fifth chance, and as many chances as it takes. Mm-hmm. That's the attitude, not you screwed up and now you're out of school. And as a student body, we were trying to like exile a kid or something like that. But they were trying to give that message of that mentorship message of like unconditional acceptance and just really interested. Like my mentors, no matter how bad I like screwed up, they were just kind of like, oh, okay, well, let's fix this. You can do better. Come on. That doesn't mean I didn't get in trouble with them or something like that. But like
teachers,
they were bested
on another level. Everyone's got to have at least a high school teacher mentor. I had a middle school teacher mentor, my 5th grade teacher. I was a very angry 5th grader. And she handled that very well. I was like extremely embarrassed when I got outed that I had little anger issues as a kid, but my teacher was just very patient on that and would always try to like mitigate the embarrassment that I had. And my dad always had me sign these little anger slips. It's like permission slips, but the other way around. So I had to have my teacher sign this little permission slip every day, and my teacher would always be really discreet about it, and make sure that kids weren't noticing, because kids would ask, "Why are you having her sign that every day?" So she was a good mentor to me. But yeah, in high school, I almost learned. I got something I learned from every teacher in high school. So they're out there. I feel like sometimes recognizing who your mentors are is kind of tough.
I want to bring that up because you probably have them even if you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
You could definitely use more of them, and they definitely deserve more respect than you're probably giving them. So, and with that, it's like some of my biggest regrets. I don't have a ton of major regrets, but definitely regret in the category of not acknowledging, keeping in contact with, and continuing to learn from the people who had those types of relationships with me. It really took me into my mid-30s to like actually go back and find people and be like, oh, wait, I got distracted. Like these people matter to me and I want to be in contact with them and I want to reciprocate that with others. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely one of those things, like in Chinese, they say the master seeks the student and the student seeks the master, basically meaning like, the connection that comes from that is mutual. And I think that's different too about mentorship. Like mentorship can't be imposed on someone.
Yeah.
And I think also you can't always get a connection with a mentor who maybe you admire unless they're willing to accept students, or there should be that serendipitous
give and take.
Yeah, well, there is some chemistry there.
Exchange.
Yeah. There's some chemistry
there. Yeah, sometimes it just has to match up, right? And sometimes you're at different wavelengths too, where your mentor is like, they're not in the mindset to have a mentee,
a student,
right? Yeah. And sometimes you're not in the mindset to accept mentorship, which I think a mentor not being in the mindset to have a mentee is totally acceptable, and that happens. You just need to roll with it. You not being in the mindset to accept a mentor is a flaw. Mm-hmm. I think that's like, if you're stressed and you're busy with work, you need a mentor more than anything else, because you need somebody to help guide that stress and that goal. But if you're like, nah, I'm just not in the mindset to like have a mentor right now, that means that you probably have a bit of an ego issue. Mm-hmm. You need to sit down and dial out your priorities and put yourself and your pride in the back seat a little bit and be like, okay, cool. Maybe I do need somebody to help me kind of pin down this particular aspect of my life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, sometimes you just don't match on wavelengths, and the mentor is not that chemistry isn't there at that time. And maybe you circle back in a couple years and
this is a really good point, and this is why I think that I really like the approach that my high school had, which was there wasn't counselors for the school. So like you didn't have like many schools have like the guidance counselor or whatever role, right? Mm-hmm. It's like every teacher had a dozen to 2 dozen kids and they mentored. Like that was you had someone that was your mentor in that relationship. And so the entire staff would then meet once a week and be like, okay, what's going on with your kids? And every teacher had sort of, highs or lows that they were talking about with students. And that's what I would like us to continue to seek out here in culture. And I think that's some of the problems that a culture faces when they scale up, is that when we're talking about sub 50 people, we pretty much knew everybody who was in the gym. And I think that doing things to make that come back together in a way that allows access to us from our students in some sort of way that has structure. We've been talking about enhancing some programs with higher level students to afford that and whatnot. In the past, it was like if you were a higher level student in the gym, you were probably having direct interactions with all of us.
Yep.
And you got to kind of sort of like naturally select for whose personality type or ambitions or what they're focusing on in that moment is what you want to focus on in that moment. And you had this library of sort of access to mentors. And when you just have the one-to-one relationship between one student and one teacher, and that student is a student of other mentors, you don't get that broad library to select from. So I think that's something that that we can focus on to make mentorship more accessible here. You know what I mean?
Yep. What would you guys say? Because I think we both experienced both mentors organically and mentors by actively seeking them out. But when you did find that person, what was your vetting process, we'll say?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question, because you want to make sure that you have this high risk of pursuing people who are doing the things you want, and you have that like appeal to authority. You have to be very careful of not, dishing out that guru complex where it's like you just are outsourcing your critical thinking to this person, and that person could take advantage of you. So you have to sort of trust your instincts around whether it's safe to be with mentors, because a lot of mentors can be trouble, right? I've been very lucky with that, but I can read people pretty well. But if you can't, and you just think the only way to get what you want is to go and pursue one person and do everything they say, I think that's a risk. I just wanted to say something about the risks of just blind trust in a relationship.
I think it's important that you don't, if you do find somebody that you want to mentor you, that you don't get hung up on them being the only option, right? I think it does matter to seek people out and be like, oh, this person seems to have existed in my life and has been, somebody who's already somewhat mentoring me. I gotta have them, right? Because the truth is, like you say, sometimes they are mentoring you already where they can, and you being like, hey, the conversation is a little different, but in summary, hey, will you mentor me, right? And they may be like, oh, sure. But they're not really ready for it, or they're not wanting to. And that may put them in a position where their mentorship is not quite as organic or as, what's the term I'm looking for here? As
natural.
Quality as they want it to be, right? And so if you're hung up on one person, you put a ton of pressure on them to be your mentor. If they know that so-and-so wants to mentor from me, I have to live up to that, as opposed to it being organic and it just happening. So don't get too hung up on if you have one mentor. There are a million experts in every single field, and you can find them. Nowadays with technology, like we were talking, it's so easy to find a mentor online. You just go on Instagram, you search the hashtag, basket weaving.
Not parkour. That hashtag is horrible.
Yeah, it is. But, and then you browse people's Instagram, and then you hit somebody up in a DM, and you're just like, hey, how did you get started in basket weaving? And they're like, oh, I started because my parents did it here, but, really where I felt like I really hit my step was in college because I did this and this and this. And you're like, awesome, cool. And then you go explore that.
It's consistency, too. Going to someone who's being, I've never gone to someone and be like, I want to be your mentee, right?
Yes.
It just doesn't work that way.
Feels a bit, organic.
Right. And also there's so much that has to do with just sitting, just shutting up and just doing the work. I am definitely somebody who's not super strict, but I do believe in consistency, and I don't think everyone has that type of work ethic on any particular, and it may shift between domain and domain. But when you find that one where you can just do the work and it doesn't feel like work, then that's a little bit of self-discovery too. And then finding someone else who's just doing the work and they just do it. I think that's another thing to do, is when you find a mentor, is this a person who seems to have boundless energy to just do what they're doing, right? Or, they could be fatigued or whatnot, but it's just they're going to wake up the next morning and they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And they're just doing it. And you're like, okay, that's someone who likes this like I like it. And then you can pursue that scenario. Justin?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. What was the original question?
His question was, how do you identify mentors?
How do you vet?
How do you vet and
Identify and vet.
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard for me to do that in the moment. I feel like it takes some time for me to look back and to realize, oh, I was just being mentored during that period of my life. But I think it would have helped me in the time, during high school and during early parkour when we were training with Ryan and Amos, just to realize that mentors aren't perfect, and that just because you run into one scenario or circumstance from the mentor that you're like, I don't like that at all, and I don't think that this person is good at this part of their life, doesn't ruin the some of the experiences that you have with them. And because I feel like this is really easy. You're like, if you look at all the people in your life and you're like, well, everyone sucked at something and they were mean to this person, then you'll never see any mentors. So
yeah, if you have like a bit of a hero complex with
Yeah,
your mentor, where like they have to live up
they're
to
not going to be
100% of the
perfect.
time.
So you just gotta, and that's really tough to separate if they have some glaring issues, but which some of my mentors did. But yeah, that's a tough question for me. I think I have to look back some. I don't know if I can do it in the moment and really see that, like, oh, this person is mentoring me without some time.
I think that's I wanted to bring that topic up. I was thinking about it this morning. I'm glad that you talked about it. Was just sort of like the humanity of mentors.
Yes.
Like, they're imperfect, and I think if you many times I've started following somebody in a particular domain and then being like, I agree with everything they are saying. They have the answer, only to eventually not agree with them and then feel gross or something. Like, I'm like, I don't agree with them anymore. All right, now I got to find somebody else. But I think if you just focus on yourself and you realize that you are going to have your own, seasoning to the way you approach life and the mistakes you make, then, and just accepting that people are imperfect heroes, right? Like you were saying, right? Like imperfect heroes. Look for imperfect heroes. Don't look for the imperfections in people, but acknowledge that your heroes are going to be imperfect and be ready for that. Be ready for them to do something or say something very human and in the experience, and then how you're going to deal with that and make that sure that doesn't wreck your own identity or your own goals and whatnot. Because all my mentors have had, opportunities, and if you're just focused on you, I think that's a big part of mentorship is being able to see yourself and in someone else and where they are, and do you want to be there, and do you like that? And then there's the idea of, okay, I like where they're at, I think I want to be there. And then there's actually being there, which is why I'm more interested in like rapid cycle testing for internships early on in your life, in your career, and being flexible and being ready to quit. Like, there's the discipline of like not quitting what you love, and there's the acceptance of you're in denial, quit what you're doing, it's not working for you, it's not making you happy. Because it's weird, like one kind of goes before the other. You need enough discipline to get deep enough into a domain to understand that you like it, but you don't want so much discipline that you're just like, you can't understand like hurt from happiness, and you're just like, oh, I'm going to stick with this. I said I was doing a 4-year degree, or I said I was doing this program for 2 years, and I'm going to do it. I'm like, whoo, for me, anything, 2 years of anything, oh, wow, that's a lot. That just scares me, the word 2 years, right? So when I think 2 years of something, it has to make me excited about putting in those 2 years, which is why I recommend.
Or the end result of what happens after 2 years has to be so exciting to carry you through 2 years.
I agree,
right?
But then there's also just the caveat to that, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying. But the one thing I would say in addition to that is, don't let that be the only. You still have to like that process, because if you wait for the other end of it as like, that's when I'm going to be happy, that's a huge gamble. So you spend 2 years on something only to find out at the end, that didn't make me feel like I thought it would. This happens with kids who graduate with degrees, and they're like, oh, well, when I get this degree, I'm going to do this. Or when they settle down, they think, oh, well, this is what I would like to do. Okay, I could see myself being that.
I do think, though, there's a bit of a difference in that the three of us are all entrepreneurs, right? So we have the mindset already that is very like fast and loose. Like, we do something, we dive in deep, and we're like, nope, actually that sucked. Okay, next, right? Most people aren't like that, and some people do want to do that grind of a 4-year degree, and at the end of that, they're like, okay, cool, that sucked, but now I love my job. Because the truth is, your job and a college education or any sort of institutional education, ideally they look very similar, but in practice they just can't, right? The product of learning to do a job and doing the job are very rarely the same on complex level things. Working in software development for a team is nothing like learning to code. They're not, right? They're just not the same, because in one realm it's you alone in your dark room for hours learning code, and the other one it's somebody like, hey, did you get that review done? Did you get out that pilot program for us? And you're like, oh crap, no I didn't, because Travis didn't give me his part in time, and now you have to work with people. But maybe you love that, and maybe you hated reading a textbook of queries and line commands, and you hated that, but you love working with a team and developing something cool. So I don't know. I think that there is truth to that if you're not enjoying the process a little bit, or you're not in the process enjoying little bits of it, like, oh man, I hated that textbook, but I love the program that I wrote as my final project. This program is just an easy example. It could be whatever, right? But overall, your process of like in school, you were like, it wasn't that fun. But maybe you will like it in the end. I don't think it's worth saying like, oh, if you're not enjoying the journey, that you're not going to enjoy the result of it. I think everybody has to make that decision. But for sure, if you're in there and you're like, this sucks, I hate it, I hate everything about it, it might be time for you to just cut it and move on.
I would say, well, then I'll say for me, as to not, push that advice on people. For me, quitting is honesty. And I wish that if I don't regret really at the high level direction, it's like everything has worked out and I'm happy with where things are, and I wouldn't change a thing, with you guys, with my family, with where I live and whatever. But in an alternate universe, but part of that's me just accepting and knowing that, either this is genetics or nurture, probably a combination of both. I'm going to find a way to be happy, and I will lose my mind not, doing the opposite, doing otherwise. And that's what made me, go in and out of school, but then go back to school to learn and then just leave when I didn't like the class. Like that was one of the, I think, the best decisions I made early on was like, I want to learn something, cool. I'm going to start college as a high schooler. This class sucks. And then I quit. Instead of signing up for a degree and saying, I need that degree, I need to pursue that, I literally would just continue to go into classes and then drop out. I would, like 2 weeks in, I maintained a really good grade average that way. You guys, like my grade average was like, B plus or something, which is not horrible. What is that, like I had like a 3.65 or something like that? Is that like? That sounds like a B. B plus, yeah. So I wasn't atrocious, but I'm somebody who would continuously quit classes. But I wouldn't, there's like the hurt that comes from training hard, and you're like really fatigued because you trained, and you're grumpy, and you're like, why am I doing this? And then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, that was awesome. I remember that. That was great. And there's the hurt from like, my soul hurts from doing this kind of work or whatever. There has to be another way.
My soul hurts
from that. And I've worked those long. Let me make this more concise. I've worked for jobs that I carried for like multiple years, 6 or 9 years, that I should have quit to in. And I believe I would have found happiness faster if I would have done that. And you should try these things and then quit. And sometimes if you're somebody, I think everybody's worried that you're going to quit and they're not going to develop discipline. But a lot of the urge to do things better in life comes from pursuing what you're passionate in. And the chances are you're going to do it anyway. Like, what are you just consistently doing? Pursue that. Like in your code example, if you went through and you did all these tasks and you were like, okay, well, I didn't like the textbook stuff, I didn't like communicating with people, but the end result of the code that I produced, I do like. Don't accept all that other stuff with it just to get that one part. Just double down on that one part.
Yeah, you don't have to accept all of it. Sometimes you do have to just work with people.
Yeah, and well, if you don't go, so the other thing is don't go into debt over it, right? So a lot of the reasons I had to stay in jobs that I would have moved on from otherwise was because I started to acquire obligations outside of that. So I took the mortgage, or I took the additional responsibility of being with friends or family who didn't have income, or I was sacrificing for income, and that's trouble. So just fix the income problem. And yeah, sometimes that's not as enjoyable, but find your mentors and start doing. Like that's the biggest thing. I think I was just talking to my wife yesterday about this, and she's like, oh, I went to school and I started studying ESL sign language because she was passionate about that. And she's like, I thought that's something that I would want to do. And then, ways into the program, I had conflict with the instructor and I decided I didn't. And I'm like, well, how often were you actually doing ESL, the sign language, signing and working with people while you were in that program? She's like, oh, I was waiting until I was done with it. I didn't feel like I was ready to start. The difference is I was just scrappier and practical because I was broke, so I couldn't afford to put myself in debt to do that work. So I would learn Chinese, and I'd be like, okay, cool. Well, I'm getting done with this class. I'm gonna go to a Chinese restaurant, and I'm gonna say the only 2 words I know in Chinese, which was like ni hao, which is hello, and xie xie, which is thank you. I'm just gonna do that, and I'd go to lunch every freaking day for the excuse, even though I was just getting like white rice and putting like sweet and sour sauce on it, right? To walk in and then have a new person be in there, and I'd be like, ni hao. And they'd be like, wow, your Chinese is good. I was like, xie xie. And then I'd be out because I was anxious to like test that faster. And that you have to do that because then you'll know, oh, I hated that. Okay, well, quit the class. Go fit. You have all the time, but you have no time. You have no time to waste, but you have all the time in the world to do what you love. And I will tell you that when you find what you love, that time feels exponentially greater in as far as like your memory and how it resonates with you than if you're just like doing stuff you hate. Like you don't remember, you know, oh, it sucked and I wasted it. Well, I had 1 year where it was just killing it. And then you'll remember that as like consuming the vast amount of your memory and time in life. And you should chase after those things if you enjoy them. So I think that's the biggest difference is if you're out there right now and you're like, well, I'm in school. What are you in school for? Go do it. You can do it now. Internship.
You can do
we
it
used
now.
to do that, right? We used to do internships. It's like, oh, I'm going to this field. And then you intern because people got it. Go do it. Oh, you hate it? Well, good thing you figured that out now.
Yeah, there's definitely no reason if you're in the middle of learning something that you can't in some capacity practice. If you're like learning to be a lawyer, you can't go out and take it on a client. I wouldn't. That's illegal. But there's no reason that you can't, go out there and try and find a case and try and study case law on your own time. And if you love that, then you're in the right area. Mm-hmm. But you're right. If you go out, if you're like, oh, I want to get into parkour, and you're taking parkour classes, for example, and then you aren't going outside to actually practice parkour in between your sessions, you don't know if it's actually something you love. Maybe you just love hanging out with the person that's, teaching you. Mm-hmm. And you just love like getting exercise and you don't actually love parkour, and that's cool too. But if you're not out there doing parkour and trying it and being like, actually this stuff's super cool, I love doing this, I love doing it on my own time, I love doing it with a group, I love doing it with my mentor or my teacher or my coach or whatever, then you're never going to get a full picture of whether that's your thing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And there have been times where I've gone after skills that I knew that I didn't really love or want, but I got them because I needed to apply them somewhere else. Does that make sense? So some aspects of business, some math and some of the organizational structure stuff, not interested in. But I was like, oh, but if I understand this a little bit, then it can support me throughout. So I would argue for you guys that my observation of you is that you're stubborn. Both of you are very stubborn. And you just won't do what you don't want to do. And you're doing this, but you're not, to some degree, acknowledging that not every
No, I know I am. I mean, my example was when I quit college, my first degree was landscape architecture. Mm-hmm. I was super excited about it. And I was like, I'm going to design stuff. And then I went to my first class and they were like, all right, guys, plant biology. We're going to be learning about grasses and trees. And I was like, out. It was like, it literally lasted like 30 minutes in that field. And I was so excited to go into it. And then I switched it. Mistake. That was a mistake. I quit too early on that one. And then I switched to business. And in the middle of that business degree, I was talking to the counselor, and he was like, so why do you want to do business? I was like, well, I'm teaching parkour, and I'm running some classes. And he was like, oh, so you're already kind of doing it. And I'm like, yeah, but I just want to learn it so I do it better. And he was like, well, by the time you graduate in your business degree, you already have so much experience that, the bachelor really isn't going to help you that much. And so I was like, oh. And so that's why I quit business school. But I quit the wrong one. If I would have stayed in landscape architecture, I probably would have been doing, or at least had the experience and going through that, and I would have really enjoyed learning design on that level.
I think a mentor, that's a great example of where a mentor could have helped you, right? Because if you were super early, so the chances of you having found a mentor that quickly are very slim. But had you had one, you could have been like, I don't know if architecture is my thing, and your mentor would have been like, oh, why not?
It's just
I
one
love
class,
it. And they would have been, you would have said, well, they're like talking about grasses and stuff, and I just want to get to like doing the cool part. Like, I don't care about, the landscaping. I care about the physical structures and the layout, right? Or whatever it is. And they'd be like, you realize plant biology is just a freshman year class, right? And then you get into the actual design and engineering aspects and you're like, oh, so you're saying I just have to suffer for a little bit, right?
Yeah,
a mentor can help you do that too. And a mentor can do the inverse, where if you're like, well, I don't want to learn about plant biology and that sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, that's 75% of the field, man. And then the mentor can tell you right there, that's a big part of the field. And if you don't enjoy that, you need to bounce.
I think a lot of parents and people are worried about that. So I think that clumping everything together, like the ability to endure and the ability to learn how to suffer towards a goal, and to just, in Chinese they say eat bitter and just grind, it doesn't have to come with a college education. It doesn't have to come with going to school. All of my ability to learn how to suffer came from martial arts. And it could have come from parkour. I can tell you right now, a lot of our coaches are suffering. Just by the look on their face. But because they are trying to learn about themselves and they're hitting walls and then they're going beyond them. And they can endure. The pain that you're willing to endure is way more than the pain that you're not willing to endure. Like the ability to learn how to suffer in your training as endurance and grit. A lot of people say this, like some of my friends will say, oh, it's breakdance for me. Oh, I studied this discipline. And because I was so passionate about it, I could push myself to the limits of my physical and mental capabilities. And confusing that with being thrown into some sort of horrible scenario you have to survive. And what comes from that is the difference between this I suffered through and I came out stronger, and I came out stronger without PTSD. Right? So it's like, yeah, you can get the results, but one's more sustainable, one's more viable. What do you guys think, as we wrap this up today, what do you guys think gave you the ability to endure the most?
I think we had really great example from our parental figures. A mom in particular who's I'm pretty sure able to just suffer constantly and still smile and enjoy it. She's it's a little masochistic, right? But she's the true American story, right? Like got entry level job, working $950 an hour in a big company, and quite literally just bullied her way into a C-level position, right? And so she was just like, I'm not happy here, so I'm just gonna work my way out of it, right? Whereas it wasn't necessarily the entrepreneurial where very much like us, we're like, this sucks, I'm out, right? And then we just go somewhere else. She was like, this sucks, I'm just gonna work harder to make it better.
Yeah.
And then her bosses were like, holy cow, you are wasted doing this thing if that's how you're gonna approach your work, right? And so I think there's two different tracks, and we're definitely too stubborn in the other realm, where she's stubborn and not I'm gonna make this thing work for me. This job, it's gonna make me happy, and I'm gonna make it make me happy, right? And we're just this job doesn't make me happy, so I'm gonna go find something. Two different tracks of stubborn. But I think seeing her example growing up was really encouraging for us. It's you can, if you're willing to suffer in the right way, you can make things the way you want them to be. Right? But if you're suffering with no goal in sight, you're just suffering.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I've dabbled a little bit with both, but not to the extent that your mom has. And also, the other thing is that she's very smart, and I think that you have to understand when you're doing really well. I imagine she was able to slay in those environments, and that stood out. If you're grinding that hard and that's not working for you,
that might not be you.
Yeah, that might not be you. Exactly. So
yeah.
So I think, okay, so you guys, as we close, I feel like this is unanswered. Where is the balance between discipline and happiness?
I use discipline to make me happy. In other words, if I am encountering something that I don't enjoy, I look down the road just a little bit, and I'm like, okay, cool. After walking on this glass for a bit, is there going to be a spa 100 meters from here? I'm like, yep. I see it right there. Somebody ready to take care of my feet once I get done walking on this glass.
Mm-hmm.
Then I will have the discipline to push through that. But if I look down the road on that and I'm like, I don't see an end goal here, that road sucks for me, right? So for me, the line of whether or not I'm going to grit through something is whether or not I can see an end goal in sight, and if that end goal is something that I am going to enjoy. Now, if it's something completely brand new to me, and I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it at the end of the road, then for me, then it's really do I have the time or energy to just willing to go through that? For me, I don't care if like at the end of the road, I'm like, yeah, I took this course on astrology, and I don't know if at the end of it astrology is going to make me happy, but I have the excess time. Yeah, I'll probably see it to the end, and I'll be like, actually, astrology sucks. I didn't like it.
How long are you willing to wait for that? And then we'll go.
Ooh, again, it depends on my time, right? Like if everything else in my life is amazing and I'm happy, I could probably spend a year on like doing a course or a mentorship on something that at the end I'm like, well, that was actually kind of dumb. If I'm pressed for time, which I am most of the time, I'm pretty cut and quick, like in a month. I'll dive in on something and I'm like, no, that sucks. Right? Out. Next thing.
So that's still very fast cycle.
It's very fast. It's definitely not 4-year college, which is why.
I think a lot of people are operating on 4 to 10 year timelines.
Ooh. That's a lot of time to waste.
Yep. So I just want to call out that it sounded like it might have been going that way, but I just want to for listeners to know that you're talking about a really fast cycle.
I am much faster. Maybe slower for entrepreneurs, but definitely faster than the average, right?
I don't know if this answers your question or not, but I feel like I can go through discipline and not even have a result as long as I'm with people who I can enjoy the experience with, and who I can look back and just laugh at the suffering and laugh that I went through it, even if I went through it for nothing.
Like eating like hot wings.
Yes.
Even though you
I feel like
any of that.
I can enjoy the discipline and I can enjoy the suffering even if it goes nowhere, but it has to be something I can look back on and experience with other people. And if I'm doing it alone, that really feels like suffering to me and really feels like discipline and grinding for something that is a gamble. But if it's with other people, that experience is something that I can use to feel happy with. So I don't know if that's the answer or not. But.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, I was curious as to how do you approach the line between the discipline and the happiness. I would say for me, it is, where does the energy come from? Meaning, like, when I'm doing it, can I do it for 13 hours? Can I do it for 5 days straight and then wake up the next day and still want to do it? And that requires, because that requires a lot of insight and self-discovery, and it takes a while to figure those things out. But I believe that once I was able to unlock and be honest with myself about how I really wanted to work and spend my time, then what came easily for me. It's not just about want. It has to come easy. Like, there's a lot of things I want to do that I think would make me happy and probably would make me happy that I just don't have boundless energy for. And we talk about this a lot. Like, anything that has to do with a spreadsheet. Woo! No. But production, I love
Justin doesn't
production.
like spreadsheets either.
Doesn't like the spreadsheets either.
Doesn't hate
I like spreadsheets, but they're just so hard.
No, I don't.
I like when they work.
You like when they work.
You like spreadsheets that I make for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You like the information that comes from the spreadsheet, because that's what I like. But yeah. So I would say that the ability to sort of like wake up excited about what you're doing, and a lot of people are like, man, that seems really hard. Like, that seems harder. Finding that for me seems harder than just doing a job. You may be right. I'm just saying that's that effortlessness, that sort of your nature just sort of like blossoming on a daily basis and just creating and making that bring value to your life and make you happy. You won't have regret. A freaking year of that, you get a year of that in and you'll just be like, cool. You'll be so satisfied. But the opposite occurs when you get older and then you look back and you're like, oh, what am I waiting for? I'm waiting to realize something that hasn't been realized. And that's a very big problem. So do that while you're young and poor and someone is still willing to take care of you. You know,
Someone's
right?
willing to forgive your mistakes.
Right, and also just like I took on a lot of responsibility as a teenager, and I don't regret it because I think that was the right thing to do. But I'm just saying, like, the ability for me to just be like, start a job for 2 months and be like, nope, or the ability for me to duck off and just do something and nope. Like, be careful what you bind yourself to, like getting in car payments, getting in debt, those things. You're holding yourself down in a way that you know. But also don't go so hard on the freedom thing. It's like, I want no commitments. Don't give me a lease. I'm going to, you know, have zero commitments.
There's a line there.
Yeah, just like, okay, there's some reality there. All right, you guys. So I want to know what's on your mind. Tell us, what is it you guys want to do? What makes you happy? And be honest with yourself. Be like, you know what? Really, when I just do this, I'm happy. There's probably an application for it. There's probably a future for you in that domain. And if you're like, oh, I feel all the pressure that I need to do X, Y, and Z, but I really just love doing parkour, then just do parkour. Just double down on what makes you happy. And eventually some of these things will manifest because you're probably the limitation. Your imagination is probably the limitation as to how you can make that work for you.
Yep. I want to say as closing that what you're saying is if you have a passion and you really do enjoy it, and it's one of those, I'll do this thing for 13 hours and then the next day I want to do it again. Regardless of what that is, short of drugs, there is a way that you can make that your career. Mm-hmm. You are your own limit if you're not willing to look in that and say, oh, actually, here's the very tiny niche that I can work in, right? The easiest example is like video games. We now have Twitch streamers who are quite literally netting $500,000 a month playing video games. Now they are a far outlier.
But that was unheard of 5 years ago. Yeah.
5 years ago, there would have been no way you can make that much money playing video games.
People wouldn't even spend 99 cents on an app. They're like, an app for 99 cents. Do you remember?
Yes.
Like,
yes, exactly. And I'd be like, well, it's $1. You spend more than that, literally when you drive your car down the street to check your mail and come back. So I'm just saying, like, if you've got a passion and not everything is exactly like that or pays well, but it's worth taking another look at. If everybody else is like, you can't make money doing that, I would challenge you to double down on it, look at it, and be like, actually, can I do this? And if I do this, what's the upside potential?
Can I make a living from it? And the other last hack I would leave you with is if you're thinking, well, I love this thing, but it really doesn't pay, okay? And usually those are the arts, right?
Yep.
You love this thing and it really doesn't pay. Then your other big lever and your big life hack is time for money and increasing the amount of money you can get paid for doing things in the short term. Thinking that you need to go to work. The gig economy has solved this. Thinking that you need to go to work, you need to learn freelance, or you need to learn a skill that pays a very high hourly rate or project-based rate where you can go and do that work, and it has to be something you don't mind and you can do really good at, so that you're working, 4 hours a day on average, and then you have the rest of your day, instead of being like, well, I like, this type of art, but I still have to work a 9 to 5. No, the hack then is you find out what it is, how you can make money and reduce your overhead so that you can spend time doing what you really love to do and only have to put a minimal amount of time for work in. And that means less overhead or higher income per hour. And I think higher income per hour scales way better than
way easier
than overhead.
Also far more enjoyable because your grit style, you'd be like, I just gotta suffer this for an hour and I make enough money to like fund my hobbies.
Yep.
That's all, it's 1 hour.
Yep. So, exactly. Hit us up if you got questions. We're thriving.
Or
I think that should be recognized. We're all incredibly happy and can survive, and we want to help our people get there too. But it's a bit of a road. I mean,
it can be for sure.
But you have time. Thinking you need to do it in your 20s is not. That's rare. Very rare. So,
thanks, Travis.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time. It's been amazing.